Marriage. It's supposed to be a partnership, a promise of mutual love and respect. At least that's what I thought when I married Emily. We were the typical American couple, meeting in college at a frat party where she was the brightest light in the room, and I was the guy lucky enough to catch her eye. Our relationship was like a fairy tale in the beginning, filled with laughter, spontaneous road trips, and lazy Sunday mornings cuddling in bed. Emily was everything I could have asked for in a partner. Smart, funny, and stunningly beautiful. She had this infectious smile that could light up the darkest room, and a laugh that made you feel like everything was right in the world. We got married 5 years ago in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. It was the happiest day of my life, the kind of day where you feel invincible, like nothing could ever go wrong. But life, as I've come to learn, has a funny way of pulling the rug out from under you. The first sign that something was amiss came subtly, so much so that I almost missed it. Emily started working late more often than usual. At first, I didn't think much of it. She had just gotten promoted to a project manager at her marketing firm, and I figured the extra hours were part of the package. She'd come home exhausted, muttering about deadlines and demanding clients, and I'd be there to comfort her, to assure her that it was all worth it. But then, other little things started to pile up. She became more protective of her phone, always keeping it on silent and face down on the table. She started dressing up more for work, too. New dresses, more makeup, and a spritz of her favorite perfume. I chalked it up to her wanting to make a good impression at her new position. I wanted to believe the best, to trust her completely. After all, trust is the foundation of any strong marriage, right? The turning point came one Friday night, when Emily had promised she'd be home by 8 for our weekly movie night. 8 came and went, and so did 9, 10, and 11. I called her multiple times, but she didn't answer. She finally walked through the door around midnight, looking disheveled and a little too flushed. She muttered some excuse about a client dinner running late and how her phone had died. I wanted to believe her, but there was a nagging doubt in the back of my mind that I couldn't shake off. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I remembered the advice my father gave me on my wedding day. Always communicate. If something bothers you, talk about it. So, the next morning over breakfast, I gently brought it up. Hey, Em, about last night. You seemed really flustered when you got home. Everything okay? She looked up from her coffee, her eyes widening just a bit before she composed herself. Yeah, it was just a really stressful day. I'm sorry I worried you. I'll make it up to you tonight. Promise. Her explanation was reasonable, and the look in her eyes seemed sincere, but that nagging doubt wouldn't go away. I brushed it off, telling myself that I was being paranoid, that I needed to trust her. But as the weeks went by, the feeling grew stronger. She started receiving more texts and calls late at night, often slipping into another room to answer them. Her late nights became more frequent, and the excuses started to sound rehearsed. I found myself becoming increasingly suspicious, checking the timestamps on her texts, subtly asking her coworkers about her schedule when I dropped by her office. The breaking point came when I found a receipt for a dinner for 2 at a fancy restaurant we'd never been to. It was dated on one of those late nights she was supposed to be at the office. My heart sank, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. I confronted her with it, and she laughed it off, saying it was for a client dinner she had forgotten to mention. I wanted to believe her so badly, but the pieces just weren't adding up. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I snooped. I waited until she was in the shower, then unlocked her phone with the passcode I'd memorized months ago. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through her messages, my heart pounding in my chest. And there it was, a string of messages from a number I didn't recognize, filled with flirtatious banter and plans for secret meetups. My world came crashing down around me as I read those words, each one a dagger to my heart. I sat there, stunned, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. How long had this been going on? Who was this guy? Why would she do this to me? To us? I felt a mixture of rage, betrayal, and heartbreak that I couldn't even begin to put into words. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to scream and demand answers, but I knew I needed more. I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal. And so, I waited. I waited for the perfect moment to catch her in the act, to see with my own eyes what I had only read in those messages. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, pretending everything was okay while inside. I was dying a little more each day. but I knew it was the only way to get the truth. The whole truth. And nothing but the truth. And when I finally did, it was worse than I could have ever imagined. The days that followed were a torturous waiting game. Each moment spent with Emily felt like a cruel charade, every smile she flashed and every touch she gave laced with a sting of betrayal. I played my part well, acting the dutiful husband. All the while my heart was in turmoil. The messages I had read played on a loop in my mind, every flirty text and suggestive comment searing into my brain like a brand. I knew I needed to catch her red-handed, but the anticipation was eating me alive. Then, one Thursday evening, the opportunity presented itself. Emily had mentioned yet another late night at the office, a dinner with some high-profile clients. I had become adept at spotting her tells, the slight hesitation before she spoke, the way she avoided eye contact. This was it. I decided to follow her, my gut telling me that tonight would be the night I got my answers. She left the house around 6, dressed in a sleek black dress that hugged her curves, makeup flawless, and perfume intoxicating. I waited a few minutes before grabbing my keys and heading out the door. My heart pounded as I tailed her car, staying a safe distance behind. She didn't head towards her office. Instead, she drove to the downtown district, parking near an upscale hotel. My stomach twisted in knots as I watched her enter the building. I parked across the street, watching as she met a tall, handsome man in the lobby. He greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, his hand lingering a bit too long on her waist. Rage bubbled up inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was the proof I needed. I followed them inside, keeping to the shadows as they made their way to the hotel bar. They sat close, their heads bent together, talking and laughing. My mind raced with a million thoughts, each one darker than the last. How could she do this to me? To us? My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, snapping a few photos. The evidence was undeniable, but I needed more. I needed to see them go up to a room, to catch them in the act. My patience was rewarded when, after about an hour, they got up and headed towards the elevator. I followed discreetly, my pulse racing. They entered the elevator, and I watched as the doors closed, noting the floor number they had pressed. My heart pounded in my ears as I waited for the next elevator, my mind racing with thoughts of what I would do when I caught them. I reached their floor, and as I stepped out, I saw them entering a room at the end of the hall. The door closed behind them, and I approached quietly, my steps almost silent on the plush carpet. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to hear. Muffled voices, a few laughs, then silence. My blood ran cold. I knew what was happening on the other side of that door, and it took every ounce of willpower I had not to kick it down right then and there. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to catch her in the act. I crouched down and peered through the keyhole, my heart in my throat. What I saw made my blood boil. Emily was standing there, her dress slipping off her shoulders, her eyes locked onto this man with a look of desire that I hadn't seen in years. He approached her, his hands caressing her body, and she welcomed his touch, moaning softly as he kissed her neck. I felt like I was going to be sick. My world was shattering into a million pieces, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. They moved to the bed, their clothes quickly discarded. I watched in horror as he pushed her down, his hands exploring every inch of her body. She responded eagerly, her moans growing louder, and it felt like a knife was being twisted in my heart with each sound she made. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness, and a deep, gut-wrenching pain. This was the woman I had vowed to love and cherish, the woman I had trusted with my heart and soul, and here she was, giving herself to another man. The sounds of their lovemaking filled the room, each one a brutal reminder of her betrayal. I stood up, my hands shaking with rage. I couldn't watch anymore. I had seen enough. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm myself. I needed to confront her, to demand answers. But I also needed to be smart about this. Storming in there and attacking them wouldn't get me the closure I needed. I needed to wait for the right moment. I paced the hallway, my mind racing. I thought about all the times we had shared, the memories we had made, and how it had all come to this. I felt a surge of anger towards the man in that room. Who was he to come into my life and destroy everything I had worked so hard to build? I wanted to make him pay, to make him feel the same pain I was feeling. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened and the man stepped out, adjusting his tie, a satisfied smirk on his face. He didn't notice me as he walked towards the elevator, and I felt a primal urge to attack him, to beat him senseless. But I held back, knowing that my confrontation was with Emily, not him. I waited until he was gone before stepping into the doorway. Emily was still lying on the bed, her face flushed, a look of contentment on her face. The sight of her like that, so at ease after betraying me, filled me with a rage I had never felt before. I stepped into the room, and her eyes snapped open, her expression shifting from surprise to horror as she saw me standing there. "What the hell are you doing here?" she stammered, pulling the sheets around her body. "What am I doing here?" I replied, my voice shaking with anger. "What the hell are you doing here, Emily? How could you do this to me?" Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. I had seen the truth with my own eyes, and there was no going back. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice trembling. "Not what it looks like?" I shouted, my anger boiling over. "I saw everything, Emily. I saw you with him. How long has this been going on? How many times have you lied to me?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Didn't mean for it to happen?" I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You didn't just trip and fall into bed with him, Emily. This was a choice, a deliberate choice to betray me." Her tears flowed freely now, but I couldn't find it in me to care. I had given her everything, and she had thrown it all away. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind me. The sound echoed down the hallway, a fitting end to the life I had known. I drove home in a daze, my mind numb. I felt like I was living someone else's life, like this couldn't possibly be happening to me. But it was, and I knew that I had to face it. There was no going back now. I had seen the truth, and it had shattered my world. Now, all that was left was to pick up the pieces and figure out where to go from here. The drive home felt interminable, every streetlight casting long, accusatory shadows across my dashboard. My thoughts churned in a chaotic loop of betrayal, anger, and heartache. I had seen her, heard her, felt the visceral sting of her betrayal, and now I was going to confront her with all the fury and pain that had been building inside me. When I arrived home, the house was dark and eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions raging within me. I sat in the car for a moment, trying to steady my trembling hands and slow my racing heart. There was no going back now. I needed to confront Emily, to make her face the consequences of her actions. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of our home now tinged with a bitter note of betrayal. I waited in the living room, my mind running through the possible scenarios of our confrontation. It wasn't long before I heard the soft click of the front door and the sound of Emily's footsteps. She entered, her eyes widening in surprise and fear when she saw me sitting there waiting for her. "Mark," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Save it." I cut her off, my voice cold and sharp. "We need to talk." She hesitated, then slowly made her way over to the couch, sitting down across from me. I could see the fear in her eyes, and a part of me took a grim satisfaction in it. She should be afraid. She had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now it was time for her to face the music. "I followed you tonight," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "I saw you with him. I saw everything." Her face went pale, and she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I continued, my anger bubbling to the surface. "How long has this been going on, Emily? How many times have you lied to me?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked down at her hands. "Mark, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen." "Never meant for it to happen?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You didn't just accidentally end up in a hotel room with another man, Emily. This was a choice, a deliberate choice to betray me." She finally looked up, her eyes pleading. "I know, and I hate myself for it. It started a few months ago. I met him at a work function, and one thing led to another. I know that sounds like a cliché, but it's the truth." "Who is he?" I demanded, my fists clenching at my sides. "His name is David," she replied, her voice trembling. "He's a client at the firm. We started talking, and it just escalated from there." "Escalated?" I echoed, my anger boiling over. You mean you started fucking him behind my back? You threw away our marriage for some cheap fling. Her tears flowed freely now, and she reached out towards me, but I recoiled. Don't, just don't. I can't even look at you right now. Mark, please, she sobbed. I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. Please, let's talk about this. Let's try to fix it. Fix it? I laughed bitterly. How do you suggest we fix this, Emily? You think we can just go back to the way things were? You think I can ever trust you again after what you've done? She was shaking now, her sobs racking her body. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you to give me a chance to make it right. I'll do anything, Mark. Anything. I stared at her. The woman I had loved for so many years, now a stranger to me. The pain and anger were overwhelming, but underneath it all, there was a sliver of something else. Confusion. Maybe even a flicker of the love I once felt, but it was buried deep beneath the rubble of our shattered trust. Why, Emily? I asked, my voice raw. Why did you do it? She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. I don't know. I was feeling disconnected, like we were drifting apart. I know it's no excuse, but I was lonely. David made me feel wanted, appreciated, but I never stopped loving you, Mark. It was a horrible mistake, and I regret it more than you can imagine. Her words cut deep, and I felt a fresh wave of pain wash over me. You should have come to me, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. We could have worked through it together, but instead, you chose to betray me. I know, she cried. I know I did, and I hate myself for it. Please, Mark, give me a chance to make it right. Let's go to counseling. Let's talk about it. Anything. Just please don't give up on us. I sat there, staring at her, the woman who had once been my whole world. Part of me wanted to believe her, to believe that we could somehow salvage what was left of our marriage. But the betrayal was too fresh, the wounds too deep. I need time, I said finally, standing up. I can't just pretend everything is okay. I need time to think. Mark, please. She reached out again, but I stepped back. I need to be alone, I said, my voice firm. I need to process this. I'll stay at a friend's place tonight. Don't try to contact me. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Okay, I understand. I'm so sorry, Mark. I love you. I walked out of the house, the weight of her betrayal heavy on my shoulders. As I drove away, I felt a mixture of relief and despair. I had confronted her, but the answers I had received only deepened the pain. The woman I had loved and trusted had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now I had to figure out how to move forward. I spent the night at my friend Tom's place. He had been my best friend since college, and if anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was him. When I arrived, he took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. What happened? He asked, handing me a beer. I took a long swig before replying. Emily's been cheating on me. I caught her tonight. Tom's eyes widened in shock. What? Are you serious? I nodded, the weight of the truth settling heavily on my shoulders. Yeah, I followed her to a hotel and saw her with him. It's been going on for months. Jesus, Mark, he said, shaking his head. I'm so sorry, man. What are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. She wants to try and work things out, but I don't know if I can ever trust her again. Tom sighed, taking a seat next to me. That's a tough one. Betrayal like that, it changes everything. But you need to figure out what you want. If you think there's even a chance of salvaging your marriage, you need to give it some serious thought. But if you can't get past it, then you need to be honest with yourself and with her. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I knew he was right. I needed to figure out what I wanted, what I could live with. The road ahead was uncertain, and the decisions I made in the coming days would shape the rest of my life. The next morning I woke up with a sense of clarity. I knew what I needed to do. I needed to confront David, the man who had come between my wife and me. I needed to look him in the eye and make him understand the pain he had caused. I left Tom's place early, driving to the address I had found in Emily's phone. My heart pounded in my chest as I parked outside his house. I walked up to the door, my fists clenched, and rang the bell. David answered, his eyes widening in surprise when he saw me. "Mark, right?" he said, his voice uncertain. "Yeah, that's right," I replied, my voice cold. "We need to talk." He stepped aside, letting me in. I could see the fear in his eyes, and it gave me a grim satisfaction. He should be afraid. He had wrecked my life, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. We sat down in his living room, the tension thick in the air. "I know about you and Emily," I said, my voice steady. "I know everything." He swallowed hard, looking down at his hands. "I'm sorry, Mark. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, you did," I replied, my anger simmering just below the surface. "You fucked my wife, and you think you can just apologize and make it all better." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I know I can't. I made a terrible mistake, and I'm sorry for the pain I've caused. If there's anything I can do to make it right—" "You can stay away from her," I interrupted, my voice hard. "You can stay the hell away from both of us. I don't ever want to see your face again." He nodded, his face pale. "I understand. I promise you won't have to worry about me anymore." I stood up, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. "Good. Because if I ever find out you've been near her again, there will be consequences. Do you understand me?" "Yes," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I understand." I walked out of his house, the weight of the confrontation lifting slightly from my shoulders. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. I had stood up for myself, made my anger and pain known. Now I needed to figure out what to do about Emily, about our marriage, and about the future that now seemed so uncertain. The confrontation with David provided a small measure of satisfaction, but it was fleeting. The anger and betrayal I felt were still boiling inside me, and I knew that confronting Emily and David was only the beginning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, heard her moans, and it was driving me to the brink of madness. I needed an outlet for my rage, something that would give me a sense of justice, a way to reclaim the power I felt had been stolen from me. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions at work and avoiding Emily's calls and messages. My coworkers noticed my distracted state, but no one dared to ask what was wrong. At night I lay awake, the events of that night replaying in my mind. I knew I couldn't continue like this. I needed to do something, to take back control of my life. That's when the idea of revenge began to take root. It started as a small, dark thought at the back of my mind, but it quickly grew into an obsession. I wanted Emily to feel the same pain I was feeling. I wanted her to understand the depth of my betrayal, and I wanted David to know that he had messed with the wrong man. I started by gathering information. I knew where David lived, where he worked, and I used that to my advantage. I spent my evenings tailing him, learning his routines, his habits. I found out he had a girlfriend, a pretty blonde named Sarah, who seemed blissfully unaware of his affair with Emily. It was perfect. I could use her to get to him, to make him feel the same gut-wrenching betrayal that I was enduring. One evening, I followed David to a local bar where he often went after work. I waited outside, watching as he laughed and joked with his friends, oblivious to my presence. When he finally left, I made my move. I approached him as he was unlocking his car, my heart pounding with adrenaline. "Hey, David," I called out, my voice cold. He turned, surprise flashing across his face. "Mark, what are you doing here?" "I told you to stay away from Emily," I said, stepping closer. "But I figured that wasn't enough. You need to understand the consequences of your actions." He looked nervous, glancing around as if hoping someone would come to his aid. "I told you, it's over. I haven't seen her since." "Good," I replied. "But that's not enough. You need to feel what I felt. You need to understand the pain you caused." Before he could react, I lunged forward, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against his car. His eyes widened in fear as I leaned in, my face inches from his. "If you ever go near her again, it'll ruin your life," I hissed. "I'll make sure you lose everything you care about, your job, your girlfriend, everything. Do you understand me?" He nodded frantically, his face pale. Yes, I understand. Please, just let me go." I released him, watching as he stumbled back, his hands shaking. "Remember that," I said, my voice cold, "because I won't warn you again." I walked away, my heart pounding with adrenaline. It felt good, taking control, making him feel a fraction of the fear and pain I was experiencing. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed Emily to feel it too. The next day, I took the day off work, feigning illness. I spent the morning planning, thinking through every detail. By the afternoon, I had a clear plan in mind. I drove to a hardware store, purchasing a few items that I would need, some spray paint, a few tools, and a burner phone. It was time to put my plan into action. I waited until evening, knowing that Emily would be home alone. I parked a few blocks away, making my way to our house on foot. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached, the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on me. But I pushed the doubt aside. I needed to do this. I let myself in with my key, moving quietly through the house. Emily was in the kitchen cooking dinner, and she didn't hear me approach. I stood in the doorway, watching her for a moment, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. This was the woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, and now she was a stranger to me. "Mark?" she said, turning and seeing me standing there. Her face lit up with relief. "You're home. I've been so worried about you." "Don't," I said, my voice cold. "I'm not here to talk. I'm here to show you something." Her face fell, and she looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Come with me," I said, turning and walking towards the door. She hesitated, then followed me, her footsteps tentative. We walked to the garage, and I pulled open the door, revealing the mess inside. I had spent the past hour spray painting the walls, smashing our belongings, creating a scene of utter chaos. The words cheater and liar were scrawled across the walls in bright red paint. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "Mark, what did you do?" "I wanted you to see," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "I wanted you to feel the destruction you caused in our lives. This is what you did to us, Emily. This is the mess you created." She looked around, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," I said, my anger boiling over. "You lied to me, betrayed me, and now you expect me to just forgive and forget. It's not that simple." She fell to her knees, sobbing. I know I messed up. But please, Mark, give me a chance to make it right. I love you. I'll do anything to fix this." I stared at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything in the world, now reduced to a broken mess. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to take her in my arms and tell her everything would be okay. But another part of me, the part that had been shattered by her betrayal, couldn't let go of the anger and pain. "I don't know if I can," I said finally, my voice choked with emotion. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Please, Mark. Give me a chance. Let's go to counseling. Let's talk about it. Anything. Just please. Don't give up on us." I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. "I need time," I said. "I need to think." I walked out of the garage, leaving her there, surrounded by the wreckage of our lives. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that things would never be the same. The woman I had loved and trusted had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now it was up to me to decide how to move forward. Whether that meant trying to rebuild what was broken or walking away from it all, I didn't know. But I did know one thing. Whatever happened next, I would be stronger for it. The next few days passed in a blur, a painful haze of emotions that left me feeling numb and hollow. I stayed at Tom's place, avoiding Emily's calls and messages, trying to sort through the mess that my life had become. Tom did his best to support me, but there were no words that could truly ease the pain I was feeling. The betrayal cut too deep, leaving scars that would take a long time to heal. I found myself replaying every moment of our relationship, searching for signs I might have missed, moments that hinted at her infidelity. Each memory was tainted now, colored by the knowledge of her betrayal. The happy moments felt like lies, and the arguments seemed more significant in hindsight. I couldn't help but wonder if she had ever truly loved me, or if it had all been a facade. Sleep eluded me, and when I did manage to drift off, I was haunted by nightmares of Emily and David. I would wake up in a cold sweat, the images seared into my mind. The constant replay of their betrayal drove me to the brink of madness. I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality, the lines between past and present blurring. One evening, Tom and I sat on his porch, nursing beers and watching the sunset. The silence between us was heavy, filled with unspoken words. Finally, Tom broke the silence. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice gentle. I sighed, taking a long drink from my beer. "I don't know, man. Some days I feel like I can handle it, like I can move on. Other days it's like I'm drowning in the pain. I don't know what to do." Tom nodded, his expression sympathetic. "It's going to take time, Mark. Betrayal like that. It's not something you can just get over. But you will get through it. You're stronger than you think." I appreciated his words, but they felt hollow. I knew he was trying to help, but nothing could take away the pain. I needed to find a way to cope, to process my emotions and move forward. But every time I tried to focus on the future, I was pulled back into the past, reliving the moment I discovered Emily's betrayal over and over again. I decided to seek professional help, knowing that I couldn't navigate this on my own. I made an appointment with a therapist, hoping that talking to someone neutral would help me make sense of my emotions. The first session was hard, opening up about my pain and betrayal to a stranger, but it was also cathartic. The therapist, Dr. Harris, listened patiently, offering insights and guidance that helped me start to untangle the knot of emotions inside me. "It's important to allow yourself to feel these emotions," Dr. Harris said during one session. "Anger, sadness, betrayal, they're all valid feelings, but you also need to find healthy ways to process them. Holding on to the anger will only hurt you in the long run." Her words struck a chord with me. I had been so consumed by my anger and desire for revenge that I hadn't allowed myself to truly feel the sadness, the grief of losing the life I had known. I realized that I needed to confront these emotions head-on if I ever hoped to move forward. I spent hours journaling, pouring my heart onto the pages, allowing myself to feel every painful emotion. I wrote about the good times and the bad, the moments of love and the moments of doubt. It was a painful process, but it helped me to start making sense of my feelings. The journal became a safe space for me to express my anger, my sorrow, and my confusion without judgment. One night, as I was writing, a thought struck me. I'd been so focused on Emily's betrayal that I hadn't taken the time to think about what I wanted for myself. What did I want my life to look like moving forward? Did I want to try and salvage my marriage, or was it time to let go and start anew? I decided to take a break from everything and go on a solo trip, hoping that some time away would give me the clarity I needed. I packed a bag and headed to the mountains, renting a small cabin where I could be alone with my thoughts. The solitude was both soothing and challenging, forcing me to confront my emotions without any distractions. Each day, I hiked through the forests, the physical exertion helping to clear my mind. The beauty of nature provided a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me, and I found moments of peace in the stillness of the woods. At night, I sat by the fire, reflecting on my life, my marriage, and my future. The quiet allowed me to hear my own thoughts, to listen to my own heart. Slowly, I began to find some clarity. I realized that while I still loved Emily, I could never go back to the way things were. The trust had been shattered, and no amount of counseling or apologies could change that. I needed to move on, to let go of the past and focus on building a future for myself. It was a painful realization, but it also brought a sense of relief. I no longer felt trapped by my anger and betrayal. I had a path forward, and that gave me hope. When I returned from the mountains, I felt more centered, more at peace with my decision. I called Emily and asked to meet her at a cafe, a neutral place where we could talk. She agreed, her voice filled with trepidation. I knew this conversation would be difficult, but it was necessary. When I arrived at the cafe, she was already there, sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. She looked up as I approached, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. I sat down across from her, taking a deep breath before speaking. "Emily, I've spent a lot of time thinking about us, about everything that's happened," I began, my voice steady. "I still love you, but I can't go back to the way things were. The trust is gone, and I don't think we can ever rebuild it." Her eyes filled with tears and she nodded, her voice trembling. "I understand, Mark. I hate what I did to you, to us. I wish I could take it back." "I know," I said softly. "But we can't change the past. We can only move forward. I think it's best if we go our separate ways, at least for now. We both need time to heal." to figure out what we want. She wiped her tears, taking a shaky breath. I don't want to lose you, but I understand. I want you to be happy, even if it means we can't be together. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our decision hanging in the air. It was a painful but necessary step, a chance for both of us to find our own paths to healing. We agreed to take some time apart, to focus on ourselves and our own journeys. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, but it also felt like the right one. The days that followed were challenging, but I found solace in the support of my friends and the guidance of my therapist. I continued to journal, to hike, to seek out moments of peace in the chaos. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece, finding strength in my own resilience. I started to focus on my own passions and interests, rediscovering the things that brought me joy. I reconnected with old friends, took up new hobbies, and allowed myself to dream about the future. It wasn't an easy journey, but with each passing day, I felt a little more like myself, a little more whole. The emotional impact of Emily's betrayal would always be a part of me, a scar that would never fully fade, but it didn't define me. I was more than my pain, more than my anger. I was a man who had faced the depths of betrayal and come out the other side stronger, more resilient, and ready to embrace whatever the future held. Weeks turned into months, and the distance between Emily and me allowed us both to begin our individual healing processes. I immersed myself in work, hobbies, and therapy, gradually rebuilding a sense of normalcy. The anger and pain, though still present, became more manageable. I found myself able to think about the future without the constant weight of betrayal hanging over me. One evening, as I was preparing dinner in my new apartment, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw Emily's name. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something compelled me to answer. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi, Mark," she replied, her voice soft and tentative. "I've been thinking a lot lately, and I was hoping we could meet up. There are some things I need to say to you face to face." I hesitated, the familiar pang of old wounds resurfacing. But I knew this conversation was inevitable. We needed closure, a chance to lay everything on the table and make peace with our past. "Okay," I said finally. "Let's meet. How about the park by our old house? Tomorrow afternoon?" "Sounds good," she replied, a note of relief in her voice. "Thank you, Mark. I'll see you then." The next day I arrived at the park early, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The park had always been a special place for us, filled with memories of picnics, lazy Sundays, and long walks. Now, it felt like the perfect setting for what might be our final conversation. Emily arrived a few minutes later, looking as nervous as I felt. We exchanged awkward smiles and walked to a secluded bench, sitting down with a palpable tension between us. "Thanks for meeting me," she began, her voice shaky. "I know this isn't easy." "No, it's not," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "But I think it's important. We both need some closure." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "I've had a lot of time to reflect on everything, and I realize now how deeply I hurt you. There's no excuse for what I did. I was selfish and stupid, and I ruined the most important relationship in my life." I listened, my heart heavy with a mix of sadness and empathy. Hearing her acknowledge the pain she had caused brought a sense of validation, but it didn't erase the hurt. "I appreciate that, Emily," I said quietly. "I've spent a lot of time trying to understand why you did it. Was it something I did? Something I didn't do?" She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "No, Mark, it wasn't you. You were always a wonderful husband. I was the one who was struggling. I felt lost and disconnected, not just from you, but from myself. David was an escape, a way to feel something different, but it was a terrible mistake, and I regret it every single day." Her words hit me hard, and I felt a lump form in my throat. "I loved you, Emily. I still do, in a way. But the trust is gone. It's like a broken mirror. No matter how you try to piece it back together, the cracks are always there." She wiped her tears, nodding. "I know. And I don't expect you to forgive me or to take me back. I just wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry. I've been going to therapy, trying to understand my own issues and become a better person. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me, even if we can't be together." I looked at her, the woman who had been my partner, my confidant, my love. Despite everything, I could see the sincerity in her eyes, the genuine remorse. And I realized that holding on to my anger wasn't going to help either of us move forward. "I appreciate that, Emily," I said, my voice softening. "I think we both need to forgive each other, for our own sakes. We can't change the past, but we can learn from it." She reached out and took my hand, a gesture of connection that felt bittersweet. "Thank you, Mark, for everything. You deserved better, and I'm so sorry I couldn't be the partner you needed." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. The park around us bustled with life, children playing, couples walking hand in hand, the sun casting a warm glow over everything. It felt strangely peaceful, a stark contrast to the turmoil of our emotions. "I think this is goodbye then," I said finally, my heart aching at the words. Emily nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "Yeah, I guess it is. I wish you all the happiness in the world, Mark. You deserve it." "And you too, Emily," I replied, meaning it. "Take care of yourself." We stood up, and for a moment we simply looked at each other, a million unspoken words passing between us. Then we turned and walked away, each step feeling like a weight lifting from my shoulders. It was the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new chapter. As I walked back to my car, I felt a strange sense of peace. The pain was still there, but it was tempered by the knowledge that we had faced our demons and come out the other side stronger. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. That evening, I sat on my balcony looking out at the city lights. I thought about the journey I had been on, the pain and heartbreak, the anger and revenge, and the slow, painful process of healing. It wasn't an easy road, but it had taught me a lot about myself, about love, and about resilience. I knew there would still be difficult days ahead, moments when the memories would resurface and the pain would feel fresh again. But I also knew that I had the strength to face those moments, to keep moving forward. I was no longer defined by Emily's betrayal. I was defined by my ability to overcome it. As I sipped my drink, I felt a sense of closure, a sense of acceptance. The journey wasn't over, but I was on the right path. And for the first time in a long time, I was at peace with where I was and hopeful for what lay ahead. In the weeks following our final conversation, life began to take on a new rhythm. The sense of closure from that day in the park allowed me to move forward with a clearer mind and a lighter heart. I continued with my therapy sessions, finding solace and strength in the process of introspection and personal growth. Dr. Harris helped me understand that healing is not linear, and that it was okay to have setbacks as long as I kept moving forward. One of the first practical steps I took was to start the divorce proceedings. It was a difficult decision, but it felt necessary. Our marriage had been irreparably damaged, and clinging to it would only prolong the pain for both of us. Emily and I agreed to a no-fault divorce, aiming to make the process as amicable as possible. Despite everything, we both wanted to handle this with dignity and respect. We met with our respective lawyers, and I was relieved to find that Emily was cooperative throughout the process. We agreed on a fair division of assets and decided to sell our house, splitting the proceeds. It was a bittersweet moment when we signed the final papers, officially ending our marriage. The sadness was palpable, but there was also a sense of liberation. We were both free to start anew. Selling the house was another emotional hurdle. It had been our home, a place filled with memories of happier times. Packing up my belongings and sorting through our shared possessions was a cathartic but painful process. I found old photos, mementos from vacations, and love letters that now felt like relics from a different life. Each item brought a mix of nostalgia and heartache, but it also reminded me of how far I had come. One afternoon, as I was boxing up the last of my things, I came across an old photo album. I sat down on the floor and flipped through the pages, each photograph a snapshot of our life together. There were pictures from our wedding, our honeymoon, and countless adventures we had shared. As I looked at the smiles and laughter captured in those images, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the good times. Despite the painful end, there had been moments of true happiness and love. Those memories were a part of my story, and I chose to honor them rather than let the betrayal overshadow everything. With the house sold and the divorce finalized, I moved into a new apartment, a fresh start in every sense. The new place was smaller but cozy, a blank canvas for me to create a space that reflected who I was now. I spent time decorating, making it my own, and finding joy in the process. It felt good to have a place that was entirely mine, free from the shadows of the past. During this period, I leaned heavily on my friends and family. They had been my rock throughout this ordeal, offering support and encouragement when I needed it most. Tom, in particular, had been there every step of the way, always ready with a listening ear and a cold beer. We spent many evenings on his porch, talking about life, love, and the future. His unwavering support was a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. Work also became a crucial part of my healing process. I threw myself into my projects, finding satisfaction in my professional achievements. My colleagues noticed the change in me, and while they didn't know the details, they could see that I was more focused and driven. My boss even commented on how my work had improved, and I took pride in knowing that I was not only surviving, but thriving. As the weeks turned into months, I began to explore new hobbies and interests. I joined a local hiking club, rediscovering my love for the outdoors. The physical activity and the beauty of nature were incredibly therapeutic, helping me clear my mind and find peace. I also started taking cooking classes, something I had always wanted to do. It felt good to try new things, to push myself out of my comfort zone, and to meet new people. Through these experiences, I began to reconnect with myself, to understand who I was outside of my relationship with Emily. I realized that I had lost parts of myself along the way, and now was my chance to rediscover them. It was a journey of self-discovery, and while it wasn't always easy, it was deeply rewarding. One day I received a call from Sarah, David's girlfriend. Her voice was shaky as she introduced herself and explained that she had found out about David's affair with Emily. She had seen the texts, the emails, and it had shattered her world just as it had mine. She reached out to me, seeking understanding and support. We met for coffee, and it was a surreal experience to sit across from someone who had been affected by the same betrayal. We shared our stories, our pain, and our journeys of healing. It was a reminder that betrayal leaves a trail of destruction in its wake, but it also connects people in unexpected ways. As we talked, I realized how far I had come. The anger and bitterness that had once consumed me were now replaced with a sense of empathy and understanding. I could see the pain in Sarah's eyes, and I wanted to help her find the strength to move forward, just as I had. We stayed in touch, supporting each other through the rough days and celebrating the small victories. One evening, I found myself reflecting on the journey I had been on. The pain of betrayal had been overwhelming, but it had also been a catalyst for growth and self-discovery. I had learned to face my emotions head-on, to find healthy ways to cope, and to build a new life for myself. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was one that had made me stronger, more resilient, and more compassionate. I thought about Emily and hoped that she too was finding her way. Our paths had diverged, but I wished her well on her own journey of healing. Forgiveness was a powerful thing, and while I might never forget what had happened, I could choose to forgive and let go of the anger. It was a gift I gave to myself, a way to free my heart from the burden of the past. In the months that followed, I continued to build my new life. I traveled, explored new passions, and opened my heart to the possibilities of the future. I met new people, made new friends, and even went on a few dates. It was a slow process, learning to trust again, but I knew that love was still possible. I was not defined by my past, but by my ability to rise above it and create a future filled with hope and joy. As I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, looking out at the city lights, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been long and arduous, but I had come out the other side stronger and more determined than ever. I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it might hold, with an open heart and a resilient spirit. The pain of the past was a part of me, but it did not define me. I was more than my scars. I was a survivor, a fighter, and a man ready to live his life to the fullest. As I settled into my new life, finding solace in my routines and newfound hobbies, my friendship with Sarah continued to grow. Initially, our connection was built on a shared experience of betrayal and heartbreak, but over time it evolved into something deeper. We supported each other through the rough days, celebrated small victories, and found comfort in our shared understanding. One evening, a few months after our initial meeting, Sarah and I decided to grab dinner at a cozy little Italian restaurant downtown. We had been meeting regularly, our conversations ranging from our personal struggles to lighter topics like favorite movies and travel dreams. There was an ease between us that felt refreshing, a sense of companionship that was slowly blossoming into something more. As we sat across from each other, the candlelight casting a warm glow over the table, I noticed how beautiful she looked. Her blonde hair framed her face perfectly, and her blue eyes sparkled as she laughed at something I had said. The connection between us felt palpable, and I found myself drawn to her in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. After dinner, we walked through the park, the cool night air filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and I felt a sense of peace and happiness that had been absent from my life for far too long. When we reached a quiet bench, we sat down, the silence between us filled with unspoken emotions. "Mark," Sarah said softly, turning to look at me. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything we've been through, and I realized that I've started to feel something more than just friendship. I care about you deeply." Her words mirrored my own feelings, and I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "I feel the same way, Sarah. You've become such an important part of my life, and I can't imagine going through this without you." We sat there, holding hands, the connection between us deepening. It was a moment of clarity, a realization that we had both found something special amidst the wreckage of our pasts. As we gazed into each other's eyes, the world around us seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us in a bubble of warmth and understanding. Our relationship blossomed naturally from that night. We spent more time together, exploring the city, going on hikes, and cooking meals in our respective apartments. Each day brought us closer, our bond growing stronger with each shared experience. The scars of our pasts were still there, but they were healing, and we were helping each other move forward. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to the mountains, renting a cabin near a serene lake. It was a chance to escape the hustle and bustle of the city and enjoy some quiet time together. The drive up was filled with laughter and easy conversation, and by the time we arrived, I felt more at peace than I had in a long time. The first night, we cooked a simple dinner, the aroma of grilled chicken and vegetables filling the cabin. Afterward, we sat by the fireplace, the flames casting a warm glow over the room. Sarah snuggled up next to me, her head resting on my shoulder. We talked about our dreams and hopes for the future, the conversation filled with a sense of optimism and possibility. As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew more intimate. We moved closer, our bodies naturally finding each other. When our lips finally met, it was like coming home. The kiss was tender and filled with unspoken promises, a connection that felt right in every way. We spent the night wrapped in each other's arms, the physical closeness mirroring the emotional bond we had built. Making love to Sarah for the first time was an experience I will never forget. It was tender and passionate, a merging of two souls who had found solace and love in each other. Every touch, every kiss, was filled with a sense of gratitude and wonder. We moved together as if we had known each other forever, our bodies communicating in ways words never could. The next morning, we woke up entwined, the early light filtering through the curtains. Sarah looked up at me with a sleepy smile, her eyes filled with a warmth that made my heart swell. I brushed a strand of hair from her face and kissed her gently. "Good morning," she whispered. "Good morning," I replied, feeling a sense of contentment that I hadn't known was possible. "Last night was incredible." She nodded, her smile widening. "It was. I feel so connected to you, Mark. Like we were meant to find each other through all of this." "I feel the same way," I said, holding her close. "You've brought so much light into my life, Sarah. I'm so grateful for you." We spent the rest of the weekend exploring the natural beauty around us, hiking through trails and paddling a canoe on the lake. The time together only strengthened our bond, and by the time we returned to the city, it was clear that we were no longer just two people who had shared a painful experience. We were a couple, deeply in love and ready to face the future together. Back in the city, our relationship continued to flourish. We navigated the challenges of blending our lives, supporting each other in our personal and professional endeavors. There were still moments of doubt and insecurity, but we faced them together, always communicating openly and honestly. The trust we built was the foundation of our relationship, and it allowed us to grow stronger with each passing day. One evening, several months into our relationship, we found ourselves at the same Italian restaurant where we had first realized our feelings for each other. As we finished our meal, I took Sarah's hand across the table, feeling a rush of emotions. "Sarah," I began, my voice filled with sincerity. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You've helped me heal and find joy again. I can't imagine my future without you in it." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and she squeezed my hand. "I feel the same way, Mark. You've brought so much love and happiness into my life. I'm so grateful for you. I know we both went through a lot to get here," I continued, "but I believe that everything happens for a reason. We found each other when we needed it most, and I want to keep building this life with you." She smiled, her eyes shining with love. "I want that too, Mark. I love you so much." We sealed our commitment with a kiss, the promise of a shared future hanging in the air. It wasn't just about moving on from our pasts. It was about embracing the love and happiness we had found together. As our relationship deepened, we began to talk about the future more seriously. We discussed our dreams and goals, both individually and as a couple. We even started looking at places to live together, envisioning a home that would be ours, a space where we could continue to build our life together. One weekend, while visiting a charming neighborhood just outside the city, we stumbled upon a quaint little house for sale. It had a cozy front porch, a beautiful garden, and an inviting warmth that drew us in. We toured the house, and with each room we explored, I could see us living there, making it our home. After the tour, we sat on the front porch, the decision weighing heavily on our minds. I turned to Sarah, my heart filled with love and hope. "What do you think?" I asked, my voice tinged with excitement. She smiled, her eyes reflecting the same emotions. "I love it, Mark. I can see us here, building a life together." "Me too," I said, taking her hand in mine. "Let's do it. Let's make this our home." We put in an offer on the house, and a few weeks later, it was ours. Moving in together was a new adventure, filled with the excitement of creating a space that reflected both of us. We spent weekends painting, decorating, and making the house our own. Each step was a testament to our love and commitment, a symbol of the new life we were building together. As we settled into our new home, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought us here. The pain and betrayal of the past had been devastating, but it had also led me to Sarah, to a love that was genuine and true. I had learned that even in the darkest times, there is always hope, always a chance for a new beginning. One evening, as we sat on our front porch watching the sunset, I turned to Sarah, my heart overflowing with gratitude and love. "Thank you," I said softly, "for everything. For being there, for loving me, for helping me find my way." She smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "Thank you, Mark, for loving me, for giving us a chance. I'm so grateful for you and for the life we're building together." We sat there, hand in hand, the future stretching out before us like an open road. It was a journey we would take together, with love, trust, and the knowledge that we had both found something truly special. The scars of the past would always be a part of us, but they were a testament to our strength and resilience, a reminder that we had overcome and found love on the other side. And so, as we embraced the new life we had created, I knew that the journey was far from over. There would be challenges and obstacles, but with Sarah by my side, I felt ready to face anything. We had found love in the aftermath of betrayal, and that love would guide us through whatever the future held. The pain of the past had given way to a new beginning, and as I looked into Sarah's eyes, I knew that this was just the start of a beautiful journey together. The future was bright, filled with endless possibilities, and I was ready to embrace it with an open heart and a hopeful spirit.